Of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of this municipal year. Just some housekeeping. Evacuation procedures. In the event of, we're not expecting a fire alarm. In the event of anything happening, please follow Combined Authorities staff and go where they guide you and assemble where they ask you to. The next thing is we're going to take apologies for the meeting. We've had apologies from Councillor Randalls, who has sent Councillor Williams as a substitute, from Councillor Addison, who sent Councillor Bradby as his substitute, and Councillor Morgan, who has sent Councillor Leach. I think you're going to swap, aren't you, from audit? Yeah, okay. In that case, the first item on the agenda is to elect the chair for the committee. So, can I ask for a proposer for chair?
I'd like to propose Councillor Jerome Thomas.
Okay, it's Kelvin Blake proposing, and a seconder. Thank you.
Right.
That's Councillor Bradbury seconding. And are there any other nominations? Okay, in that case, could I ask for a show of hands of vote for Councillor Thomas to be chair? Thank you, that's carried. Congratulations, Councillor Chair. I'd like to, Councillor Chair, Councillor Thomas, if you'd like to take over with the election of the Vice Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. And welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We're now electing the Vice Chair for the municipal year 2025-2026. Do I have any nominations?
I propose Councillor Hodge.
And do I have any seconders? Councillor Rivington and Councillor Leach. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Hodge, Lucy, you're elected. Thank you. Look forward to working together. We are, before we go on to the Mayor's Q&A, and the Mayor will be with us very shortly, could I ask, because we've got a number of substitutes, you could slightly point your nameplates towards me, just so I can make sure that I can see people's names. Lovely. Thank you very much. We are waiting, we're literally just kind of waiting for the Mayor. So I think she said she'd be here at 10:35. Yeah, that was good. So I think we'll probably just talk. Yep. Tim.
Yeah, just very small point of order, but you didn't ask whether there were any other nominations for Vice Chair. So
oh, yeah, okay. Apologies. Any other nominations for Vice Chair? No. Lovely. Thank you. Elected unopposed. Yeah. I'll just say a little bit about the Mayor's questions. If you've asked a question, Helen is grouping them into a number of different topics: the spatial development strategy, the CRSTS, constitutional reform, and working relationships. If you had a question of Helen, this is a kind of a first go at things. She will answer verbally. We're not expecting necessarily any written follow-up, although that is to be finalised. Could you sort of read the question that you have to her so that she can answer it? So I think, Toby, you've got a question on spatial development strategy. I think, Tristan, you've got a question on spatial development strategy as well. And then, Lucy, you've got a question on CRSTS. And then on constitutional reform and relationships, I think you've got a question, Toby. So, and I've got a couple of questions on the spatial development strategy and all that travel. Welcome. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, and welcome to your first meeting, Mayor Helen, as to the Overview and Scrutiny. So, we look forward to working together in the coming years and hope that's a successful and sort of flourishing relationship. So, and that we hold you appropriately to account, as is our job. So, we appreciate your presence here, and there's been a slight change in format. So the questions have been submitted in advance by councillors, so that you've had a little bit of time to prepare answers, and we've grouped them into themes. And the first question, I think, is on the spatial development strategy, and I think Tristan, you had a question, didn't you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My first question is, can WECA set realistic boundaries for a spatial development strategy before the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government confirms that the current reorganisation of local government is complete?
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Tristan. I don't think we've met before. So the spatial development strategy is, I think, a key piece of work for us to do collectively over the next few years. You'll know that the government is looking at local government reform more generally. I think your question probably refers to the potential expansion of the combined authority into North Somerset. We have received a letter prior to my election, actually, which would have gone to Stephen, which talks about the inclusion of North Somerset in any spatial development strategy. So the preliminary work that we're doing on the STS will includes those conversations with North Somerset, and as we begin the process, North Somerset will be involved.
Thank you. My second question is, many residents will be concerned that an STS is merely a mechanism by which central government can impose additional housing on communities against their will and without the need for local decision making and accountability. How, given our past experiences with regional plans, can WECA persuade residents to engage with the regional plan making process?
Thank you. So I think that's a great question. I think the combined authority is quite unusual, actually, in having this power at this stage. So it is one of the powers, if you like, that will be given to all combined authorities as a result of the English devolution bill. We've had it for some time, and as everyone in the room knows, have failed to establish an STS in the past. So I think that comes with a challenge, because we know that we have to get it right this time. But I also think we can draw on that experience to make the process better and actually to give ourselves the best possible chance of succeeding. Obviously, as we all know in this room, when you go through an election campaign, you spend a lot of time talking to residents. And what I found during the last sort of 6, 7, 8 months is that residents in our area are not opposed to development. They don't oppose it for the sake of opposing it. When they are concerned, they are generally concerned about the provision of public services to support new development. And they're also concerned about lack of transport infrastructure, both in terms of roads and public transport infrastructure. So what I think and I hope is that if we get this process right, and we can only do that if we collaborate across the whole region, that we will give residents the opportunity to engage and to see that there is a lot of thought and consideration going into that work to try and tackle the housing crisis which affects the whole region.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up questions to the Mayor, Tristan, which you're allowed?
Yeah, no, I did have a more. I'll stick to one.
Thank you.
Yes, the unitaries have struggled to meet their own housing targets in the local plans. The thorny issue in previous attempts to regional plan has been the issue of unmet regional housing need. How can the mayoral combined authority finally cut this Gordian knot?
Great question. So I think we have to come at this from several different directions. Firstly, I don't think we can look at the STS as purely a vehicle to meet the housing need. We know we have to do that. That is a really important part of that process. But I think we have to have a much broader conversation about how we're using our space and our place in the best possible way. I think we have to be bold, and I think we have to have a regional view on what we're trying to achieve. So I think one of the challenges we've got in our region is that we do tend to go hyper-local. I was at a Baines Housing Summit on Friday, where they've probably got some of the bigger challenges around unmet need. So it's pushing those conversations so that you're having really productive conversations. And we're looking, as I said in the round, we're looking at the transport infrastructure that might sit around future development. We're looking at the restrictions that we've got around Greenbelt. We're looking at that brownfield first approach. But I think by having those collective conversations, we can start to share thinking and move towards where we need to get, which is to meet our unmet housing need across the region. So it's not going to be easy. I'm not pretending that for 1 second, but I think a regional approach, a collaborative approach, and looking at a sort of place first approach will work for us.
And I had a question on spatial development strategy. I mean, in your manifesto, you talk about prioritising the right homes and the right places, backed by an essential so, essential services first approach. I'm particularly interested, what's the role that you would like to play as you kind of, as we've got this kind of brokering role almost between the local authorities, and it's a kind of it's the Gordian knot that Tristan described. What's the role that you personally would like to play in trying to shape this, given how challenging it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've said, because I think this is one of the key things that we do need to achieve during the next 4 years, I think I have to put myself in a position where I'm front and centre to that, because I need to help to steer that, but also help to untangle where necessary as well. So I see myself being involved the whole way through that process. We are starting over the summer to have some bilateral conversations with unitaries, working with Stephen, working with John Wilkinson, who's our new Director of Housing and Regen. The intention there is to have those one-to-ones in a kind of informal environment where we can almost kind of get underneath where the red lines are, where the problem areas are likely to be. Some of those maybe internal challenges that that might be happening at a unitary level, and just try and understand, okay, what's our pathway through that, but also where are the opportunities, and actually get a steer from those conversations which areas we might want to explore, which sort of transport corridors we might want to focus on, etc., etc. We know we've got the local plans to go from as well. So all but one of the unitaries are kind of in process with their local plan. So that gives us our sort of starting point. And obviously those have been produced at the UA level. So we will be going in, with a full kind of understanding that that's what they want to work to. And then it's where we start to work together on the gaps, I guess. And, if I can be of help in in those conversations, I will be there to do so. Thank you.
And one of my follow-up questions is, how would you like to be working with North Somerset in this process, given their aspiration to be part of the combined authority, and the willingness of other unitary authorities in the region to accept them as part of the combined authority? How would you like to be working with North Somerset?
So the approach to North Somerset in this piece of work will be the same as it is with Bristol, Baines and South Gloucestershire. So we've already set up those one-to-ones that I talked about. They'll be happening with North Somerset as well, so that it will be very collaborative, very open, informal to a point until we start the process. But the intention is to build those relationships so that actually we can have constructive conversations in that process, rather than I think having things sprung upon us or challenges that come very late in the day.
Yes. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I don't think there were any other questions on the spatial development strategy, were there? No. So could we go on to the CRSCS, and Lucy, on to your question? If you could read what your questions were.
Yes, thank you. Initial optimism around the announcement of a 750. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, is that better? Yeah. Sorry. After initial optimism around announcement of a 752 million TCR funding in June, comes the sobering reality of what we might be left with at unitary level to complete our active travel ambitions. With 150 million rail funding mostly for the Brabazon development, 200 million on mass transit out of Bristol, and 150 million for maintenance, the remaining 200 million shared between 3 unitaries will not go far, especially when we in Baines need to look beyond a constrained World Heritage City to provide a doubling of our housing numbers with a consequent new transport requirements. Is this seemingly a Bristol-centric distribution of funding fair, and where do we look now for funding for our local active travel schemes?
Thank you for that question, and thank you also for welcoming that overall investment, which was really quite unprecedented for our region. It's more than we've received before. Those initial allocations are indicative at this stage, and we will be working across the region to put together what will actually be the programme of delivery for TCR, as it will be known. Transforming City Regions is the name of the new fund. So I personally will be hoping that we can take a fully regional approach to that. I kind of, I'm not sure that what's being talked about at the minute is Bristol centric because it hasn't been place specific, but I'm obviously mindful of trying to support the whole region, but at the same time I'm mindful that our boundaries are not boundaries in which people live and operate day to day. People cross boundaries all the time, and so it's actually about trying to get the best possible experience transport wise for all of our residents. The other thing I would add as well is that there is additional active travel funding that Active Travel England have received in the spending review, and which they have not yet allocated. So we are in quite a lot of conversation with Active Travel England, and some of the kind of informal conversations I've had, they see this region as somewhere really strategically important for them. So I'm hopeful that that will also bring potential additional funding to us. But certainly the process that we'll go through for the allocation of TCR will be very collaborative, and will definitely be a kind of cross-region approach as we start to hone where those kind of priorities, so that the rail is a priority, mass transit is a priority, but as everyone I think knows, improving buses is the absolute priority for now. That will be across the whole region. That is not something that I'm looking at with a Bristol-centric lens.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, and nice to have the heads up on that active travel funding that might be coming through. My second question was just a specific one on CRSTS 1. With the fast approaching March 27 deadline for spending our CRSTS 1 funding approaching and a challenging construction phase ahead, when will we get clarity on any potential rollover of unspent grant?
Yeah, really, again, a really good question, and I think a really pertinent question. It's something that is very clear to me in my first few weeks of that programming around CRSTS is problematic in terms of its super back-ended, and I think it's providing challenges on a number of levels. Councillor Weston's contribution this morning on the radio around, that phasing, and I'm very worried about that myself in terms of how we make sure that we get this done, but that we phase it in a way that doesn't affect our residents to the point where things become too difficult for them to get where they need to get to. So those conversations with the DfT around that cut-off, which is, I know, looming over all of us and particularly officers at the moment, are kind of ongoing. Early conversations, I think, are quite positive in terms of understanding and being pragmatic about how challenging some of this is, and wanting to get the phasing right, but also wanting to make sure that we spend all the money that is there. We're expecting some guidance at the end of the financial year in terms of that transition between CRSTS and TCR, which we're hoping will kind of reflect some of those conversations that we've been having. But it might be one to speak to officers later in this meeting, just from a kind of, where they are as of today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And linked to that was my second question about active travel. And I mean, it was great to see in the national press that you're one of the country's kind of 12 regional mayors who've signed up to create a sort of national active travel network. I'm just wondering what actions you're planning to sort of lead on that, or to take part in that national commitment.
Yeah. So for those that didn't see, we had a mayoral active travel summit a couple of weeks ago in York, which was chaired by Chris Boardman and Chris Whitty, which was a great combination in terms of that kind of transport focus on travel, and then the health benefits that Chris Whitty led on. And 12 of the 14 mayors signed the sort of pledge. For me, I think we have led the way as a region on active travel for a very long time, and I think we have kind of embedded active travel into our day-to-day transport system, and also our day-to-day lives in a way that not everyone has. So I think there's a lot to celebrate in terms of where we are. The conversation at that summit was very much kind of thinking about a child-centred approach, which appealed to me. As many of you will know, my background was as cabinet lead for children at Bristol. And so the idea of school streets, which was introduced during that time and continues to evolve and continues to be rolled out, but sort of expanding that into more kind of child safe zones almost. So thinking about how we use our school streets projects, of which I know we want to expand, but thinking about how do we create safe routes between those schools, parks, high streets, and how do we make then sort of child safe communities, but obviously with active travel at the heart of that. And that's thinking about cycling, but that's also thinking obviously about walking and wheeling as well. And there was some really interesting conversation about how we think about our infrastructure, not just looking at key routes, but also beyond that. And I think that really speaks to that sort of child-centred approach. So obviously there's been lots of work that's already happened that I can't take the credit for, but extensive work that Active Travel England have been involved with. So we've got things coming to committee actually next week or this week, specifically around Bath Quays, cycle training and maintenance, cycling infrastructure at Temple Island and the Bath Bridges. We've got some money for school streets coming through. We've got money for Prince Street Bridge to make that fully active travel space. Cycle hangers. I won't go through the whole list, but there's lots coming through at committee on Friday, which I think demonstrates that real commitment. And the other thing, which I think is helpful, is we've got Chris Boardman coming to see us next week. So he specifically asked to come and spend some time here. So I'm looking to show him some of that work already. And again, as per Lisa's question, to be able to talk to him about our commitment to active travel as a region and how we really want to continue to embed that.
Thank you. That sounds like there's kind of some real commitment there.
I think so, yeah. It's good news.
I think we're moving on from the CRSTS and active travel onto, I think you've got a couple of questions, Toby, which cover the area of constitutional reform and working relationships in the authority.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Hi, Mayor. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming to this meeting. I think it's really important that you do so. We really appreciate that. The first question is about constitutional reform. So considering the changes at this authority in terms of its overall size and the devolved powers that have changed since the last time the Constitution was updated, are you considering to do a constitutional reform exercise?
Yeah, so I think the real trigger for this, as you say, the organisation has changed anyway, and continues to change and evolve. But I think the kind of big milestone will be the English Devolution Bill, which is going to be coming through. And I think that was obviously the first reading was on Friday, and that will now go through the parliamentary process. And I think what will come out from that, as people kind of get more familiar with that, is that there is significant changes for a combined authority in terms of the powers that will sit with us. So the Constitution absolutely will have to be reviewed in order for that to come through. And we've already done sort of a full project plan in terms of how we start to do that, so that that will be a full process that will be led by our lead, Bob Brown, a legal monitoring officer. So yes, is the answer.
Okay, thank you. As a supplementary quickly to that one, would you be happy to codify your attendance at this meeting and the audit meetings in the Constitution?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Do I do my second question, Jerome?
Yes, please.
So the second one is more about the internal working relationships at the authority. I won't rehash all the difficulties that everybody knows about under the previous mayor and the troubles that led to, but what actions are you taking to rebuild the sort of internal relationships with the officers and within this organisation?
Yeah, so I have come into this job as obviously myself, and so anyone who's worked with me before will know that I tend to be pretty straightforward and pretty consistent in how I go about my business and how I work with people and how I treat people, which is with kindness primarily and with the intention of getting a lot of stuff done. So my approach has been from day one to reach out. So I spoke to all the leaders of the other authorities from day one. I spoke to senior people in government from day one. I asked Councillor Guy to be my deputy, I think on my first day in the office. And I have just tried to be very inclusive, to keep people informed and up to date of things, to have a good approach when it comes to comms. So when we're making announcements, when we're going on visits and things like that, we're telling the relevant people, the relevant leaders, MPs, etc. I've got a diary slot on once a month for MPs to come and see me, drop in, or to pick up a call. And that's, so far I've met with Claire Young, Karen Smith. I'm meeting with Vera Hobhouse this week. I've regular meetings with Darren Jones as well, and all the other MPs, you know, we've got scheduled in. So it's about collaboration across all parties. You'll see barely a week goes by without me and Tony being in a photo together. So we're getting used to that, but just trying to be constructive in those conversations, trying to find challenges before they become issues, I think is really important to me. Being present, being accountable. We've got regular sort of columns in some of the local newspapers already, so that we've got access to residents. We're thinking about a programme of kind of mayoral question time or something similar that will enable me to get out and about. It's a very big region. It covers 9 constituencies. So, you know, there's some thinking involved in how we make sure that people are heard. And obviously we've got 2 cities and then lots of rural and semi-rural communities that we want to make sure, again, feel included. But it's a very natural process for me. It's not something that I'm trying to overly think. I just, as I said, just try and be collaborative and treat people with kindness where possible.
Thank you. That all sounds like positive first steps. Can I ask a specific supplementary about the red box system? Does it still exist, or has it been consigned to the recycling bin?
I'm assuming this is a system from the previous mayor that I'm not familiar with, so you might have to explain it.
I think it was the formal way for senior officers to communicate with the mayor was via this mysterious red box.
You might be better asking my senior officers.
If you don't know about it, it probably doesn't exist anymore, which is a good thing.
No, I do not have a red box, and I do not know what the red box system is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the questions, unless I've missed anybody's questions out. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and just repeat that, you know, we look forward to working together with you in a constructive way.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for the questions and for the interest. And you know, if people do want to follow up on things specifically with me directly, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on March the 10th, 2025. So it's recording accuracy only. Do I have a proposer for the accuracy of the minutes, or any comments on them? Mark, propose seconder for the accuracy of the minutes. Lovely, thank you, Toby. So minutes are approved as accurate record of that meeting. We're now on to declarations of interest and under the Localism Act. And I just remind people who haven't yet completed their register of interests to do so with Democratic Services. I want to register an interest for this meeting, which is I am a safety consultant on high-rise buildings, so it doesn't impact any kind of discussion when it comes to the building remediation item on the agenda, but just for noting. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. I think under Chair's announcements, I think the only thing I would comment on is that in terms of the forward plan for this committee, there's been quite a degree of priority that's been attached to making sure that the transition with the new mayor is a kind of as smooth as possible. And we haven't yet done as much work on the forward plan as we would like. I'm certainly going to be meeting with the Vice Chair, with Lucy in September, and fleshing out a bit more work on the forward plan, and then we'll very much intend to involve other members of the committee in the shaping of that for the coming year. So that's a bit thin at the moment, but in the circumstances, you know, I think it's most important that we get a successful transition with the incoming mayor. We're now moving on to items from the public, and we've received 7 questions which have been published along with responses on the Combined Authority website. I did see that there was one challenge to one of those questions. I'm happy to pick that up outside the meeting. We might have to address that at a later date. And we've received 6 statements which have been published on the website, and some of those people who've submitted statements are here to speak to them today. So we're going to welcome people in the order in which the statements have been submitted. So Suzanne Audrey, would you like to speak to your statement? And you've got a kind of 3-minute maximum speaking time. Thank you.
3 minutes seems a luxury after Bristol's 1 minute, I would say.
Yeah.
I wanted to congratulate Mayor Helen Godwin first on her election, but she's not here. But I think it really does feel like we've got a more positive phase for the West of England Combined Authority. And I'm sure you all want to focus on the future, but the accounts and scrutiny have to look at what's happened over the past year. And there's at least one issue that requires clarification. I'm sure there's more, not least because the current chief exec and deputy chief exec were in post at the time. I've been told by the monitoring officer not to mention their names, but I suppose you know who they are. It feels rude not to mention people's names if I'm talking. Anyway, a contract awarded to Sieves Consultancy Limited has cost the Combined Authority £150,000 for 9 months, July 24 to March 25. And there have been a couple of freedom of information requests made, but the responses have not given any proper explanation of the procurement process. The Information Commissioner's Office has been involved and noted delays in responding, and that they might have to get involved in the future. Previous questions. Sorry, I can see the chief exec's talking. All right, thanks. Previous questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee have also not resulted in an explanation of the procurement process. And it's really disappointing that my questions today haven't been answered properly. I asked what procurement process was followed, and then I was informed that the contract fell below the public procurement thresholds within the public contract regulations. So I've done my best to look at those. I'm assuming it's the 2015 ones because the others haven't come into place. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't mean that there has to be no procurement regulations followed at all, and you can just do what you want. So there are questions still about, which I thought was a fairly straightforward one, what procedures were followed to make sure it was transparent, value for money, and adhered to the public sector equality duty. So I'm hoping this scrutiny committee, because I can't ask a lot of questions, I'm hoping this scrutiny committee would just ask the questions, and the chief exec and the
30 seconds, Chair.
Thank you, and deputy chief exec, who are both involved, it's clear from the FOI requests, can actually give a proper response to how it was procured. Because if not, then I think it's going to fester and negatively reflect on the new mayor's administration when we want a more positive future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and sorry for speaking with the chief exec while you were doing that. Stephen will have a statement on that, a short statement, but I think that it's probably best that that comes after we've heard all the other statements, so that if there are other things that you want to cover at the same time, Stephen, then we can. And in terms of whether, I mean, given the nature of the relatively compressed nature of the timetable in terms of questions coming to scrutiny and then being able to respond, I think there's a limited amount that we could look at in this meeting or discuss in this meeting in an informed way. But if there needs to be a discussion at a further meeting, then I would commit to that if there does need to be a discussion of that. So the next speaker registered as being here is David Redgewell. David, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Dear Redgewell, obviously a member of the Bus Advisory Panel for Wecker and North Somerset. So I just want to raise the equalities issue, really. And this is falling through the cracks. And the cracks are between the unitary authorities as highway authorities and WECA as the transport authority with North Somerset. Recently, a number of bus service changes were put in place, both as this authority in Bristol and the other unitaries. But no account was taken of disabled people needing to get on and off buses. So bus stops were changed in the Haymarket, where buses stand over on the number 9, the park and ride service, and an 8 service, which is the rail link, comes in and it can't dock. So disabled people are either left with the bus in the front having to move or going onto a different stand, which is supposed to be closed. I don't understand where the equality is. Well, there's a public equality duty. I'll be declare an interest here. I'm on a panel funded by DFT with cross-country trains. So I advise National Rail and DFT. So we have a public qualities duty and we have a panel and the DFT fund us to do that work. This is not happening here. And the question is, Andy Burnham, Steve Rotherham, both have panels, both have ways in which we're trying to pursue access to the public transport network in Greater Manchester and the Liverpool City region. We need to come up to that standard. We can't have this percentage where Bristol City Council say they're in charge or WECA says I'm in charge and the disabled people fall through the middle. And I've given some examples in the statement of the Haymarket of Brislington, where Alan Peters, who is a bus operator and also Weboer chair, and he gets no action either. So it can't fall through the, this is public money. It's the City Region Transport Fund money, and it's got to be spent properly. My request here, of course, is set up an equalities duty here with an equalities panel, like they've got in the other combined authorities, chaired by an elected member, and to which officers are accountable at the unitary authorities, the 4 of them. Because we can't go on like this. This is a public equality duty. It's number 5 in the pillar for the Secretary of State, who's a Swindon MP, of course. So I make those points. But there is progress. I am pleased with the progress, Stephen. There's a lot more bus routes coming back. We've got the Portishead Railway, we've got the Hembury Loop, but the Hembury station still doesn't have planning permission. So I chase that one as well. And there's an issue with the DIA, Diversity Impact Assessment, for a bridge to go down to access a platform. Still not resolved with South Gloucestershire Council Network Rail. But we're building that line. We need to move forward. It's been going on far too long.
30 seconds, Chair.
Okay, so I urge that one to go forward. On the region, we've still got to speak with a strong voice. We didn't come out much money at the regional level. So we didn't get the Dordrecht Sea Wall, we didn't get electrification, and yet the North and the Midlands got a lot of money. So we've still got to work on our regional something. And finally, can I just ask the next tranche of electric buses? We don't buy them from Japan. We actually try and buy them like the other mayors from Scottish manufacturers and Irish manufacturers, which are threatening going bankrupt. Can we please look at our procurement policy for buses and stop buying from, China, I meant not Japan. China, my apologies, Chair. China, can we please not buy from Pelican? Can we please make sure the Mayor has a buy UK policy? Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Jackie Head, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks very much. I'm here to raise some points about the West Local scheme, of which I am a great fan. Our group managed to secure money for 2 bus routes, which we designed and we're now running, and we're delighted with the operators, the Big Lemon, and with the scheme. However, I think I want this committee to look at whether this people-powered transport, as it's labelled, has any elements within it which are actually quite disempowering to the people involved in running the schemes. And I would argue that there are some elements that could be looked at. In particular, we're given the opportunity to ask for changes to these routes every 6 months, which we have done each time, basing our changes on research that we've carried out in the area. We're given a tiny timescale to get our bid in, even though we're all volunteers and we're doing it in our spare time. And WECA is given a huge timescale within which they have to reply to us. When we did this in April, one of the things was turned down simply because they said they hadn't had long enough to explore it, even though they'd had way more time than us. And more recently, we had 11 days, including a bank holiday, to get in a bid, and 9.5 weeks later, no response to us. So that's one thing. The other is the management of the comms budget and the way that comms is managed around these schemes. So we're in a situation right now where we have an embargoed information. We're not allowed to share with our own community that these buses impact. It has to first be shared by WECA Comms. And that's done without consultation. It's just announced. And then we have to follow up with our community saying, oh, yes, we did know about this. Oh, yes, this is what this is about. It's ridiculous. So we really want these schemes to go on. The funding ends in March. We'd love to know what your plan is, or what WECA's plan is, to carry on these really important buses that are really well valued in the area. But we want to be treated as equal partners. We want, for instance, we just sent off our report on the 30th of June to loads of different people saying, look, we've got new evidence of trends in transport over the last 5 years. We haven't even had a response to that report. And we're not being kept in the loop of the decision-making process. We're not being trusted with information within it. You know, we put in a huge amount of time voluntarily, and we act very professionally. And we just want to be treated as partners properly within this. But the scheme's fabulous. Please don't cut it.
Thank you, Jackie. That concludes the statements. Stephen, you wanted to make a statement. I don't know if you wanted to make any comment with regards to Jackie's observations, Jackie and Dave Redwell's observations as well.
I know, Dave, you've spoken before to the Acting Director of Transport here, and I know he'll be keen to take up those points, particularly around inequalities and the ways in which people interpret the requirements, not least under the legislation. So that will be taken up with you. I would suggest equally on the matters just been raised about West Local, officers are in the room here, so I think it would be a good idea afterwards, if there is a moment for you to connect. I'm looking at one of them now, and I'm sure they'll make a beeline for you, because we definitely want to pick up those points. Thank you for raising them. So, Chair, if with your permission, I just want to make a comment about some recent questions that have been raised concerning procurement, and I welcome the opportunity to really clear this up. There were last summer some former senior officers in the organisation were responsible for running a compliant process for the procurement of 2 consultants that I had asked them to bring in. The decision to bring that specialist resource in was necessary to address 2 specific organisational needs. Improvements in communications, which you've just heard from the Mayor, are now working better, but which back then were not working. And I don't think there's any debate about that. And also improvements in the overall organisation, which had been subject to a best value notice. The 2 individuals that I asked to bring in brought specific relevant track records that meant they were the right people at that right moment. Earlier this year, the new monitoring officer brought to my attention the fact that the process that former officers had followed to bring in those people was not in compliance with our own internal procurement rules. This was not a breach of public procurement law, but regulations, I should say, but it did fall short of our internal standards. When this information came to light, I instructed officers to sort it out, to regularise it, with one of the consultants who was looking to be kept on for a few months more, but the other was already scheduled to leave. So we just took the decision to regularise the one, but not the other. Work to improve our officers' understanding of the internal processes which were in place and still are, forms part of the ongoing work on organisational improvement. So we have taken that on board and are making sure that it's put into place in terms of the communication of the processes that are there and need to be followed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. The next item on the agenda is the terms of reference, and as this is the first meeting of the municipal year, can I ask the committee to accept the terms of reference as laid out in the Constitution and as shared in the papers? So, by a show of hands. So they're accepted. Thank you. The work plan report, I mentioned at the start of the meeting that the work plan report is a bit thin, but more work will be taking place on that in the coming months. But we do have a sort of, we've been pretty active on a number of fronts in terms of briefings that we've had. So on CRSTS, and we've had visits in adult skills, and actually kind of continuing that process of expert briefings is very much something we want to do. A really high priority one is bus reform, where Arup is undertaking work on franchising and other models. So expect that in the coming months. I'd like to ask members to note the report with any comments, and would very much welcome suggestions for. Yep, Councillor Westland.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I do have a suggestion.
Yep.
Can I just, though, the procurement breach that the Chief Executive mentioned, can I check if that has been checked by the Audit Committee? So that is it is sort of undermining of public perception.
So, I mean, that will be one for the Section 73 officer to comment on. Obviously, it will be everything gets reviewed as part of our year-end audit. Solange, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, agreed. So, so as part of year end, we've got our external auditors in at the moment. So, so they will pick this.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. One of the things I wanted to raise potentially is to do with when the mayor's here. There seem to be several schemes that, well, one that has definitely been allowed to drift, and that's Metro West. And it seems to be drifting towards the Pacific at this point, into the distance. I referred to it once as the Holy Grail, and I noticed in the response to David Redgewell that we now have a 2028 opening date for the Henbury station. Well, it was 2021 originally, so we're doing quite well there. So that's drifted. The CRSTS scheme is one where it's so backloaded, the potential for drift there is a problem. Regional spatial strategy, the UAs are drawing up their spatial strategies at the moment, but actually they're all going to have, even those that are doing it now are going to have to do their own again under the new rules. I just wonder whether with the mayor we actually sort of need a standing item per time she comes here, of which we'd like an update on, and then dunk. Because if the mayor's getting an update on these all the time and having to give us an update on it all the time, it can't be allowed to drift. Officers will know that the mayor will be taking an active interest in this. Because at the moment, I am quite nervous that some of these big ticket items are just going to go on and on and on forever, and the date will just be moved back with bare and nod or a whimper from anyone else. So I just throw out an idea that possibly what we need to have is a standing item update on certain key things at every meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. I mean, my initial response to that is organisationally, we want to be setting, a limited number of key objectives that are achievable for the organisation, and that if we very much hope that those key objectives are on track, and if they're not on track, then they get addressed by the mayor. I'd be a bit concerned about fixing what it is that we want the mayor to be talking about at each meeting, but very much kind of take that on board as we look at the work plan and the structure of the questions for the mayor.
I take your point, Chair, but if to use your rail-related pun of on track, when it comes to rail, we may be on track, but we are moving glacially slowly. So I put that anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yep. Sorry.
I think Toby going before me.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But I'll come next.
Okay. Toby.
Thank you, Tim. Very kind. Just quickly on Councillor Weston's point, there are updates on those items in the main committee papers more or less every time. Those papers are very complete, but I appreciate they are so complete sometimes that it's quite hard to extract what's actually changed since the last time. So I kind of see the broader point that perhaps a super summary.
Them side by side and go through.
Yeah. And then some points I wanted to raise. So firstly, just to thank officers for the briefings we've had over the last few months. They've been very helpful to allow us to get into the detail of some of these topics. There's a question in the report about whether the action tracking that's now been added should cover just the actions that remain open, or whether it should be a report of everything that's happened between the meetings. And I think that's a question that's put to the members here to discuss here. My view would be, for public accountability, we should be describing everything that's happened between the meetings, not just looking at the actions that remain open. I think it's important to have all that work on record. Then in terms of future work planning, you mentioned bus reform. I'd be very happy to see that coming to us soon. The transport for city regions, formerly known as CRSTS2, Councillor Weston will be pleased that that's been made a bit less of a mouthful. Yeah. We know that there's a key deliverable for that at the end of the year, which will set out the WECA's aims for TCR. I think it'd be good to get Scrutiny involved at some point before then to help shape that a little bit. Finally, on the SDS, we know this is going to be a much longer term item, and I'm sure Scrutiny will be involved at various points along its journey, but perhaps there's a chance for a kind of early session looking at what's the approach that will be taken in those early stages of the SDS and how Scrutiny can help with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Councillor Rippington, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question on the action status table. The item on housing numbers, transport schemes need to be better understood. It's marked as open, whereas there are others that are marked as ongoing. Does that mean that literally no discussions have been had with the Mayor on that topic since it was entered on the 10th of March? Or is it actually just ongoing rather than open?
Sorry, which item was that, Tim?
That's the action status table. Yeah, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Housing numbers, transport schemes need to be better understood. That one.
Yeah.
I think I could answer that. It should say ongoing. Really, it's open because it isn't closed, but it's not doesn't mean it hasn't started.
So so I assume it should be ongoing because otherwise it would have a different status from the others that are ongoing.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Hodge, you were next. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just building on some of the things for the work plan. Something that came to mind recently actually is whether we could have a session on, for better understanding of all the mechanisms and delegation changes for drawing down central funding to all our statutory areas of delivery. Because when I think about transport, and a lot of talk at the moment about accelerating funding drawdown, early works funds, low risk transport schemes for acceleration for small schemes, active travel, streamlined approach for acceleration of decisions about larger schemes. There's a lot of language in each statutory area actually about delegation and how that, and I think it would be really good to understand it more clearly.
Thank you. Kelvin.
Thank you. Being new to the committee, it feels like I've landed on a different planet, if I'm being honest with you, with all the various acronyms and what have you. No. I mean, I'll work through that. For me, what we've got to try and do as this committee is not become another layer of bureaucracy that kind of slows this organisation down. It feels to me that potentially we could probably do that. But that said, what we should be doing is scrutinising and actually bringing our sort of collective knowledge and voice to improve decision making, both prior to decisions, but also when stuff have happened and learning for the future. So I think that's our collective responsibility. I'm slightly disappointed, and I'm disappointed and also kind of understand it to some degree that the work programme, we haven't got some options there. There's some big ticket items that this authority is responsible for delivering, and I'd like to think that we could look at a few of them, right, and see how we're doing. And I think those could have been fleshed out a bit more potentially. And I worry that we lose another 3 months potentially between now and September. Then we'll have to sign it off. There's potentially a loss of number of months here in the important work that we do. I've recognised the briefings. I think Councillor Wells suggested, and thank officers for giving us the update on on the various schemes that are responsible for. And my final point is around disability and around equality. In this report, it says there's no implications for or no equality implications for disability and what have you. I mean, I mildly and slightly disagree with that. It could have made a point that said that there are multiple potential impacts on disability yet to be defined. I mean, I think let's aim to be the best we can and the most efficient we can, but let's aim high. And I think that that's, for me, the importance that we have here is to kind of ensure that we dig into the important things that this authority is doing to make sure that those that are marginalised have a voice, and we have a responsibility to do that, and that we have a productive, constructive relationship with this authority to improve the decision making that it takes.
A couple of years ago, this committee had subcommittees with focus, and it seemed to enable the scrutiny to get into a lot more detail than is possible this meeting. And I wonder whether that would be a suggestion for the future, be that transport, economy and skills, that sort of stuff, and using the resident skills of people within this scrutiny to focus on certain issues.
Thank you. I mean, I think that the way that we're trying to work with briefing sessions is one element of that. I also know from the kind of the national forum of scrutiny chairs that those kinds of subcommittees around the country are quite common. So I think that is something that we want to be looking at, but very much kind of taking into account Councillor Blake's approach about, you know, how many layers of bureaucracy do we want to have, and we need to be, you know, keep our focus as tight as possible to be able to make a difference. I think on the actions, there's one thing that I want to pick up there, which is that on the carbon outcomes, and by this, what I mean on the carbon outcomes, if we're looking at some of our key choices, you know, whether it's insulating homes or you know, active travel, we need to be able to have an understand of what the carbon impact is of our different policy interventions, and that item is marked as closed at the moment. So and I think Roger Hoare is the officer who is who's the relevant officer for that. I would very much consider, you know, that extra detail on carbon and just an improved process around carbon literacy very much still to be an open item and an ongoing item. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Roger. Yeah.
Good morning, Chair. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to open that up again and make sure it is a continuing action. It is a continuing action for the organisation. If you'd like, I can give you a very brief update on what we've done since it was raised here.
Yes, please.
To tackle that. So I think we came in February last year to overview and scrutiny and talked about carbon management and the need to do more. Since then, we recruited a carbon management officer, and they have put in place a policy for carbon management in the organisation. So that covers both our role as a kind of convener and leader on carbon and net zero. It covers what we do on our investments and our projects. And so for schemes like the Bristol to Bath corridor and the M32, we're working with those teams on carbon management assessments so we can understand kind of the both the impact of the approach as well as the kind of like the baselining of what we can expect from a carbon perspective. But we're also working on the estate of the combined authority as well, making sure that in line with the unitary authorities approaches, we are working to decarbonise our estate. So I think overall, we've been working with colleagues across the unitary authorities to make sure our approach is in line with theirs and supportive of what they're doing. And in key schemes like CRSTS, for the major programmes over 5 million, we're working on detailed planning around carbon. And that will start flowing through into the smaller schemes once we've got our process running, and we're confident that that's not going to end up inhibiting kind of delivery.
Thank you. That does sound like good progress, and reassured to hear that it's remaining open, because it's obviously such a key consideration as we address the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for your comments regarding the work planning. Very much we'll take those on board as we sort of update the plan in the coming months. I mean, I think Councillor Blake, in response to your challenge, I think with the bus reform items still outstanding, I feel that the sort of the optional extras that we're dealing with are going to be dealt with. You know, we're going to have enough to keep us busy between now and the end of September, and then let's get the next items to make sure that we have got that scrutiny in the right areas. Whether it's, you know, like Lucy's comments on sort of let's get the overview on the, you know, how delegations are working, or yours and Dave Redgewell's comments around equalities and disabilities, so that we are able to sort of really process those and address those in the right sort of way. And I think, Toby, on the actions and actions tracking, I think there is something there about always making sure that you've got a short list of things that you can see at one view that you know are the outstanding actions, but sitting in the background, you can point to the worksheet that shows what the progress has been, so that things don't get lost and forgotten, and you've got an audit trail, but the focus on outstanding actions is really clear. So you're combining the best of both worlds. That would be good. Thank you, everybody. Any further comments around work planning, do please get in touch with myself. And so we're noting the report, and we're moving on to the next item. Can I ask members whether we're on to just the reports, I think, for the combined authority meeting, the joint committee and the full committee on the 18th of July. Would members like a 5-minute break now before we do that and go into a rather different session? I can see some nodding there. So yes, okay. So let's take a short break for, and perhaps we say that we're back at 2022 would be good. So that's a kind of more like 7 minutes, lovely.
Just a moment, I need to step away at 12:45.
Yeah,
we're done.
I think. Thanks very much, everybody. Welcome back. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes slow starting. I just wanted to be clear about which officers were talking on which items. So we are reviewing the papers going to the Combined Authority and Joint Committee on Friday, and the first item. I just double check the notes. So I'm going to. Yeah, I'm just going to take them in order, which is the investment fund programme and the delivery assurance first. And we've got Pete Davis speaking to that. So Pete, if you come up, and perhaps Pete, if you could, perhaps officers come up here, that would be Lindy. Do you want to come up here? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. The investment fund programme report is a regular report on the committee agenda. It has two purposes. Firstly, to give an update on the position of the investment fund, and also to capture new funding schemes or new assurance and governance matters. In terms of the investment fund, there has been a review of the programme to see if there are opportunities to add more funding back into the investment fund headroom. Figure 3 of the report sets out proposed swaps between the investment fund and CRSTS capacity funding, totaling 5.3 million, which would add that fund back to the headroom. Approval is sought for the Bath Quays Links full business case, which the Mayor referred to earlier in her comments, a package of walking and cycling measures in central Bath. This draws on a blend of investment fund and CRSTS funding. Apologies to the councillor who mentioned lots of acronyms and ATSA and LRTS. The report also sets out the proposal to streamline the business case process for small active travel schemes, and the narrative that will be included in the local growth assurance framework is included in the report, which would enact that change. Hopefully that will make business case production more efficient and quick for those types of schemes. The final 7 recommendations in the report relate to the acceptance and use of new funding, being £200,000 from Homes England to support the Strategic Place Partnership, 25k from South Gloss to work on the West Innovation Arc, and £1 million from the Department for Business and Trade for a technology adoption pilot.
Any questions?
Sorry, this one, it might be better answered by one of the transport officers, so happy to defer it later if that's best. But the question is on the active travel streamlined approach. Do we have a view of how much in terms of £1 million of the current CRSTS programme could be delivered under that streamlined approach, just to understand what sort of impact it's going to have on delivery?
I couldn't give a quantum figure. We've only recently we developed the approach and started to have engagement with our UA partners. There seems a great deal of interest. We've already had a couple of submissions that are moving through that process. So I would think for schemes within that sort of up to 10 million scale, there would be a good opportunity to move through that process. At this stage, I can't give you a quantum of what the whole value would be.
And Stephen points out that transport officers hold the question for the transport officers as well, Toby. Thanks. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, and this might be one which we discuss later with the transport elements. I was just wondering if there's been any clarification on Joint Local Transport Plan 4, because we're just under a third of the way through that. And we seem to be perennially waiting for central government to advise us on how we proceed with that in terms of either a replacement document or a rolling document.
Might sit better with transport, yeah. So hold the question. Thank you. Yours is the next item too, Pete. So on to delivery assurance.
So this report sets out the change request for schemes in the current. So apologies, I'll start again. This report sets out change requests for schemes in the current investment fund programme. These have been considered by the Portfolio Review Board, which comprises the Combined Authority and Unitary Authority Directors and Chief Finance Officers. Those change requests recommended for approval are set out in Appendix 1 of the report. There's been some discussion, as noted in the report, about the role and purpose of the Portfolio Review Board and fit within wider governance, and this is being reviewed. There was also an intention to develop a corporate programme management office through the Combined Authorities Organisational Improvement Plan to ensure processes and systems supporting delivery are optimised. Finally, just to confirm that changes to the CRSTS programme are not included in this report. Those are considered by the CRSTS programme board and approved through existing delegations, and those which have been approved since the last meeting of committee are set out in the transport update report later on the agenda.
Any questions for Pete on that? No? Thank you. We're then on to the, thanks very much. Yeah. John Wilkinson, you're coming to talk to us about the remediation programme. Thank you. Welcome, John, to the authority. I understand it's your third week here.
It is, yeah. Correct, yes.
So, if you put your mic on.
That one? Yeah, is that working? Great. Well, thanks for the welcome, and I'm delighted to have joined the authority. So I think just say a few words about the remediation paper. So you are all no doubt familiar with the Grenfell fire and the tragedy that was, and the government's programme to, as rapidly as possible, remediate high-rise buildings where unsafe cladding remains an issue. The national government has produced a national remediation plan to try to speed up the process of replacing unsafe cladding where it exists. But they want to go further, and they have recently written to all of the mayors to ask the combined authorities to set up essentially a local version of that national remediation plan. So the paper sets out the process that we're proposing to take to put that in place, and it comes with some funding. So we will be obviously using that to set up the capacity for us to enable that to happen. We obviously don't have statutory powers over cladding, so this is very much a convening role for the combined authority to bring together those agencies and organisations who do have responsibility to produce that plan and to speed up the remediation, which is obviously in everybody's best interests. So the paper before the committee on Friday sets out how we propose to take that forward and to produce our local remediation plan by the autumn of this year.
Thank you. Any questions for John? Councillor Wells?
Thanks, John. It's clearly a really important issue. What I struggled to get to grips with in the paper was what are the actions that will actually be taken as outcomes from the plan. As you say, WECA doesn't have any particular powers in regard to this. So what tangible difference is this plan going to make to the buildings in our region and the safety of people?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And essentially the paper is a plan to produce a plan. I know that sounds a bit naff, but essentially that's where we are in the process. So the government has asked us to come back with that detail in the autumn, which we will do. Clearly, part of that process will be to make sure that we understand where the high-rise buildings are, who the landlords are, where they are in the process. So there will be a fairly heavy data exercise to make sure that that data is clear and consistent and we understand it. And then I suspect, and I'm not sort of prejudging the outcome of what the plan will look like, a lot of it will be to do with scrutiny to make sure that those with responsibility are are doing what they should be doing to speed up that process. So yeah, apologies that it's a plan for a plan, but that is what the government has asked us to do. We need this to draw down the resources in order for us to produce the more detailed action plan for how we'll go about doing that. But needless to say, it will involve very closely, and I know the team that I've am now working with have already been working with those statutory bodies who do have the responsibility. So the fire service, for instance, have already been very heavily involved in the process to date.
Thank you, John. And Stephen, you wanted to just add a couple of words.
Perhaps just obviously John is new but very experienced in all matters really. As you told me in your, before you joined, I mean, John's last job at MHLG, he was in everything. So I'm sure it'll be fine to giving you this job. But I think the important thing is, as the previous chief exec of Bristol, where we had the statutory responsibility, I was responsible for producing their plan, and I saw the challenges and what John just talked to you about data. A really huge problem with data. So I, having spoken to all of the chief execs of the Mayoral Combined Authorities, all of whom, broadly speaking, have core cities with high rise, we've sort of approached this together with our unitary partners to say what value add can this bring, and if it can bring focus, attention on the really big important things that need to be done differently, sometimes which are quite hard to change in central government, for example. I think this is where we can play a good hand as Mayoral Combined Authorities convening. We must avoid any confusion about statutory powers, however. So having done the job in Bristol, though, it was very difficult when you're one of maybe 50 to 100 organisations putting data in, to know that your voice was being heard. I think we can do a better job aggregating with a smaller number of us. That's the theory of change, I think, and a genuine sense in the heart of government that this just isn't being gripped at the pace it needs to be. So I think this is perhaps one of those new examples of where mayors are going to be doing a convening role, which is sort of what the English devolution bill is really all about. So I think we're in a reasonable place, but there's a lot of work to do, and finding a way of doing this without the statutory powers will be kind of new experience for every Mayoral Combined Authority.
Thank you, Stephen. I think the comment that I would make is that the Building Safety Registrar is absolutely central to the kind of the management of this risk, and anybody who has got who's in charge of a building over 18 metres has got to register with them, and they will have a huge amount of that data, and they are also triaging what is happening at the moment. So they are working their way systematically through the highest risk buildings for remediation, and it should certainly be acknowledged that they are a key holder of that data. More so, I think, than Homes England, which is the other organisation kind of mentioned in there, and for organisations with tall buildings in social housing, I think it's the social housing registrar. Councils are having to routinely update the social housing registrar on the status of their buildings. So there's a lot of high quality data already in the system. We, I think if it brings the focus on the resourcing in the Building Safety Registrar as a way of making sure that actions are moving as fast as possible, that will be helpful as well. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, mate. I don't know if it's me again. Let me just see. Sorry, my screen's just died. So
Yes, spatial.
Oh, that's yes.
Lovely. Okay. Yeah. So it is you again, John. Thanks very much.
So the Mayor spoke a little about this earlier in the questions, but this is obviously a pretty significant opportunity for us as an area. So just to put again a bit of sort of context around this, so you'll be aware, all of you, that the local growth plan, which is currently something that we are developing, is essentially what the government calls the kind of guiding star document for the region that sets out where our strengths are, where we want to go in the future. It provides that kind of narrative. The spatial development strategy is essentially the document that will identify the broad locations for the jobs, the homes, the transport, the other social infrastructure, the way that we want to do development. So it takes the local growth plan and translates it into a sort of spatial map, if you like, which will then become the sort of guiding document that we will use, as has already been said, alongside and building on the local plans. It is not a replacement for those local plans. They remain the key documents for ultimately delivering those aspirations. As has previously been mentioned, we have had this power to do a spatial development strategy for a number of years. We've tried twice, but haven't managed to get that over the line. What is different this time is that the Secretary of State, the Deputy Prime Minister, has said that she would like to see, there will be, perhaps putting it slightly more strongly, full coverage of spatial development strategies across the whole of England by the end of this Parliament. So there is a very strong ambition to deliver this. And why is it important? Well, it helps us to be in control of the sorts of places that we want to see developed in our area over the course of the next number of decades. And with it will come the funding and the support that we need to deliver the sorts of places that we all want to see take place in our area. So it is a really important document for us to get right. The report, the paper itself, is essentially asking the committee to re-kickstart the process and to draw down the resources that have previously been allocated for us to build the capacity, to build the team alongside the unitary authorities and our other partners to enable us to do that. So it's a kickstart of the process, and there is also some money which MHCLG is granting local combined authorities to help with that process. As has already been said, it is all of our intention to make this a hugely collaborative process. My personal view is, and the Mayor, I think, articulated this very well earlier today, that this is about the sorts of places that we want to see. And interestingly, we've all been very focused on the 1.5 million homes target, which the government has announced at an event last week where the Chief Executive of Crisis was speaking about that. And there was huge delight, I think, across the sector that the government is really focusing in on this. But actually what he said was, let's not get too fixated on that number. Of course, it's great to have a level of ambition, but let's be more fixated about the sort of places, the sort of homes that we're building and the sort of infrastructure and support that we're putting in alongside them, because it would be perfectly possible to deliver 1.5 million homes and for waiting lists to go up if they were the wrong sort of homes in the wrong sort of places. So let's be delighted with the level of ambition, but let's make sure that we're also focusing on the sorts of places that we want to see in our regions. And that's the work that we want to kick off alongside and working in partnership with the local authorities.
Thank you, John. Quick questions for John. Councillor Rippington.
Yes, so my question is really about how, because obviously we've not had this plan in place for a few years now, and certainly in Bristol, we've pushed ahead with developing our own local plan in the absence of a spatial development plan. How are we going to kind of reintegrate between what's been happening in the absence of this plan with the new one that comes along, so that they do match up, obviously?
Yeah, thank you. So I think, as the Mayor mentioned earlier, the sort of kick-off point is a series of bilateral meetings that the Mayor will be holding with the leadership in each of the local authorities. And that will be exactly one of the questions that we start with, is how do we make sure that we are building from the local plans that are all being produced, and I know are all at slightly different stages of gestation. And I think that is one of the complexities of us doing this. I won't kind of shy away from it, is how do we make sure that we're not duplicating, we're not undermining, but actually we're building from. And obviously there's a whole load of new kind of planning policy that's coming through the system in any case, through the kind of national policy at the moment. So our starting off point is to work with Bristol, North Somerset, South Gloucestershire, Bath and North East Somerset to have that conversation and to make sure that we are able to build from where you are at the moment, and not kind of cut across that.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you. Coming back to unmet regional housing need, I think it was welcome that the Metro Mayor is trying to take the public with them on this. I think she's right. This is not about sort of parochial NIMBYism. People do appreciate there's a housing crisis. They do appreciate there's a need for housing, more housing, and we need infrastructure to underpin it. In terms of the coherence of our approach towards that unmet regional housing need, how are we going to maximise sort of brownfield redevelopment potential? Because one of the flaws with the joint spatial plan, as if I remember it rightly, was essentially you had greenbelt sites which were strategic development locations, and then you had reserved SGLs which were outside of the greenbelt, which was incoherent in terms of national policy. Releasing land from the greenbelt should be the last resort, and yet GSP failed in that sort of principle. So yeah, how are we going to say take residents with us on addressing unmet regional housing need when we really do, or we really are already struggling as unitaries to deliver those housing numbers?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think as the Mayor said earlier, it's definitely a case of brownfield first, and we want to make sure that we are maximising the opportunities that are already there. And I think there are, you know, lots of, partly as I was saying earlier, through the bilateral conversations about local plans and how we sort of maximise densities and other questions like that. So I think that's the first thing, is to reiterate that point that we're very conscious about it being brownfield first. But I think, as I said earlier, I think clearly the numbers are important and we want to get to that point. But I think the starting point needs to be a conversation about what sort of places do we really want to have in the region, in the west of England? What are the infrastructure needs that we're going to need to put in place early in order to make them feel like they're the places that people want to live? And, you know, I've lived in the west of England for 15 years. And I think, you know, we've probably seen some developments that we wouldn't necessarily think are as good as they might be. And I certainly, you know, when I speak to my friends who are thinking about buying properties and for their children, you know, often the grumble is, well, we didn't quite deliver what was being promised. And I think we've got to get to a place where we're kind of almost being kind of purpose driven about the way that we go about doing this. So the first conversation needs to be, what sort of places do we want to have in the west of England? And I think that then opens up some easier conversations about the numbers ultimately and where we end up. So that feels to me like the sort of process that we need to go through.
Yeah, thanks. Just another question on this, focusing in on this idea of the infrastructure that goes alongside housing. It's obviously a real problem at a sort of local authority level, and has been for a long time, of having enough power to kind of to bring forward things like health services, because you have to deal with the health service. Does the mayoral authority, do we think that the mayoral authority will be able to do that at a higher level and sort of bring forward things that local authorities themselves are not able to bring forward in terms of joint services and that kind of thing? Is there do we have more clout, if you like, to get that resolved?
So, Councillor Rimington, I think one of the interesting things is you read the English Devolution Bill down and Community Empowerment Bill. In fact, that's an important second part to the bill. It does talk about the right to request, for example, being a power that mayors will have. So the right to request means you can basically require other bodies, national bodies, to basically at least take a meeting, which at the moment is beyond us with some national bodies, to be blunt. So the intent is that if you're going to put growth at the heart of a mission, if you're the government and you are intent on devolution, you put those two things together, and when how does that play out locally? It means that you should, as a strategic authority, be able to say to a community, we can build a plan with you, not for you, with you, that talks about what was this place going to look like? How do we bring the NHS to the table? There's again clear reference in the devolution bill to mayors having a role on ICBs. That's a very live conversation running at the moment, I have to say, across the country about how does that take effect with the 10-year plan for the NHS. But the intent is really clear. Likewise, the Transforming City Region Fund, CRSTS2, is explicitly there as a tool to help us deliver that spatial priorities. Is it enough? Of course not. We need more. But does it look like converging? Bringing things together like that gives us the best shot we've ever had, certainly in my working life, to do more. Yes, I think we have to see that as the opportunity, and there is a piece of the jigsaw we need to not forget, which is this city this region and this core city of Bristol is the fastest growing part of the mayoral combined authority network around the country in population growth terms, which broadly means economic as well. That's good, but we need to continue to make a case as to why we shouldn't simply be left to one side by a government that will put resources disproportionately elsewhere if we can't agree amongst ourselves. So for us, if we want more funding for infrastructure and better jobs, better public services, we've got to show that we can put this all together, and an SDS is a test.
Can I just come back on that as well? Just we obviously have in Bristol, one of the biggest regeneration projects in the country in Temple Quarter, and we're a bit. It's a shame that this hasn't come, a bit earlier in terms of that project, because the worry there is that we won't have the infrastructure on the ground and the services built in as part of that development if it's kind of developer led rather than, I know we're hoping to have a plan for it, but the more that WECA's influence can help to with that particular development, even though it probably won't be in time for the spatial plan, I think, it'd be interesting to hear about that.
But I actually see this as a real opportunity to really knit it in ever more closely. I mean, we're talking to Bristol literally every day about Temple Quarter and how does it play into the emerging plan for an SDS? How does it play into Bristol's local plan, the next one? Because clearly there's a gap, isn't there, at the moment, which Bristol acknowledges and wants to go out and talk to people about again. And so Temple Quarter is very much in our thinking, but as is the transport connectivity, because that is the epicenter, isn't it, of our public transport system. So if you've got a seriousness about upgrading your infrastructure and you can move around within 10, 15 minutes of Temple Quarter, think how many areas of population you can reach. And so it's not just that. And so when we had the new towns task force, visiting as they do recently, we were able to show them, Bristol, Temple Quarter, the whole of the city centre, and up to Brabazon and what we call the West Innovation Arc, the areas sort of, including Bristol and Bath Science Park. They're so close to one another, and there's such spectacular opportunities, great jobs, fabulous homes, and lovely places to be created. So it's a huge opportunity, Tim. So I would say it's not too late. It's absolutely the right moment, because unlike a lot of these schemes, we've got the physical as well as metaphorical shovels in the ground. So it's not just talk, it's happening. And that's what a government who wants to show change can be delivered wants. They want to make sure they can get behind things that are going to scale, grow, and deliver more. So I think it's a good time for that.
Bell is my leader. Yeah. I'm Observer Somerset. Yeah, thank you. No, it's just the commenting on spatial priorities and what they should be. I think each unity authority is a different character, and I think they're going to need to be flexible. North Somerset itself has over 40% Zone 3 floodplain, over 40% greenbelt, and practically no brownfield sites. So I just think that those priorities are going to be extremely flexible, and then treat each unity authority very slightly different, probably.
Thank you. I want to build on Tim's point really about ensuring that we have development that is sort of holistic and actually includes the sort of all the elements of public services that make the place to live a fantastic place to live. And I think that sort of, I think it's right that we're trying to take a strategic approach, but we acknowledge the technical developments that are taking place. But my worry is that the NHS is at the table. Every development that goes forward, they always put forward their proposal for NHS services in the area. The fact is that they never come to some kind of agreement on the provision of those services. So the NHS provide what they think they need, and then that's somehow not accepted. We've got 2,000 new homes going into East Bristol, well, Northeast Bristol, in fish ponds, and currently we've got a bit of a battle between the NHS and the local authority. And I've said to our last members' meeting to Tony Dyer, please take some leadership. Resolve this issue. Don't just resolve it from an authority perspective, resolve it from a city perspective. And I know that I have no problem with Temple Quarter. I know that's on the strategic list for the NHS. I've seen a set of slides that shows the provision of health services in some of the strategic developments across the region. But the problem is these more tactical, smaller but quite significant housing schemes that are being missed. And we've got to resolve it. We need leadership. And I think if this provides, and the mayor will have more responsibility over this, and that's great. For me, it's not so much about sort of right to ask. It's more about getting in front of the process to stop, so you don't have to use that power, essentially. So we have a much more holistic, thought through plan going forward. And of course, we're doing our bit as local councillors, meeting the developers and pushing for the need for the services. But ultimately, it's kind of above my pay grade, ultimately, to resolve this. It's with the leader, it's with the local authority, and it's with this organisation and the developers to kind of make sure that we resolve this issue, because we're missing it at the moment. And we've, just to give you some level of context, and I'll shut up after this, that the GP practices all around within Fish Ponds area are between and 75% oversubscribed, and they've got no ability to develop on their premises. So they will fall over with 2,000 new homes going in to that space. So it's a tactical thing I want to raise, but we're missing it right across the piece at the moment. And therefore I welcome the ability for us to kind of get a grip of it.
Thank you, Calvin. I mean, I think all the questions around this are very much kind of speaking to that question of us as a scrutiny committee doing pre-scrutiny well, so that what we're looking at is how is the spatial design strategy going to be different this time from last time? Simply saying we're going to get on well with each other because we've been told to by central government isn't going to cut it. We need to go back and say we tried this before, and relationships broke down in the relationship between the region and the individual local authorities. So I think we have to go into the process with more questions than what sort of places do we need to have. We need to be raising these questions of kind of supporting services and infrastructure. We need to have a good understanding of what did go wrong when things broke down last time, so that we can maintain good, productive working relationships and learn from that failure last time. And we need to work out how we're going to negotiate our way through it. Because if some local authorities are going to have to take more homes, then the quid pro quo might be that they have to get more of the transport budget as well. So looking at these things in a kind of well-managed way, recognizing that it's not, it's good, there's going to be some tough elements working to this, means I think we need to get that kind of design of that process at the start a bit more ambitious, in the sense of the way the kind of questions that we're going to be asking around such important questions for the region and the component unitary authorities. So this is definitely an area where I think we're going to have to do a bit of a deep dive in the autumn to say, let's look at what went wrong last time, and also the role of the volume house builders, because in their perfect world, they take the green belt, they stick up a whole load of sites, and they don't necessarily pay for any infrastructure. So there's that tension between the needs of our communities and the organisations that are putting up the houses and want to put up the houses. So it's a really rich area for us as kind of scrutiny to be getting involved with in a very engaged and productive way. Yeah,
and I really welcome that. I absolutely agree that this is not an easy challenge, but it's a massive, massive opportunity if we can get it right and if we can go into it in that spirit. I'd really welcome that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Bradbury. Yeah.
Is there any scope within the spatial development strategy in the future to have a role in resolving issues across local authorities about, for example, unmet housing need? Do you think?
As in the strategy itself? Yeah, I mean, I that is part of the conversation. Ultimately, is to come up with a document that says how are we going to deliver against the need that we've got in quantifiable need across the region. As I said, though, my personal view is I don't think we should just start with it being a numbers game. It needs to be about the place that we want to create. And I think that would then enable us to have some of the more difficult conversations, because we've got a shared understanding and vision for the sort of place that we want this to be. But yes, those will be the sorts of questions that we will be looking at. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I referred to the spatial design strategy. It is, of course, the spatial development strategy. Thank you. We're on to the transport infrastructure, which I think is Ben Mosley and Chris Salmon. And could I just say, as Stephen has said that he needs to leave at 1:45, so we may well be done by then, but we may well not.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Mosley. I'm the Interim Director for Transport and the Assistant Chief Executive.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Salmon. I'm the Head of Transport Programmes.
This will be my last scrutiny committee as interim. I just want to say to members who've been in contact with me raising issues around transport, thank you. It's been very helpful. It's been a really real privilege to have done the role for about 9 months, and I'm really pleased that we're bringing this report here today. It is a smaller report. There will be a larger report coming in October covering CRSTS, particularly around rebaselining, answering a number of questions which have already been raised at committee. Today's report covers 4 areas. First of all, the acceptance of separate funding to deliver 160 electric buses, which we're really proud of, but also really great transformations in 4 depots in the region. Item 2 is to address some inconsistencies in our delegations and to speed officer decision making up, particularly around CRSTS. Members who were present for the informal members briefing on CRSTS a few weeks ago were aware of the challenges within the portfolio, and one of those challenges was around decision making, and this report addresses not only that challenge within the CRSTS portfolio, but also a number of other funding streams. Third relates to active travel, where we're asking the committee to approve 3.4 million for the proposed programme within the paper. And then finally, the 4th recommendation focuses on Metro West and North Filton and the approval of a drawdown of 4.5 million from CRSTS to begin the construction phase of the scheme. This is a relatively small paper, as I said. Please stand by for a larger paper in October, where a significant amount of recommendations will be coming to committee.
All very happy for questions, and we can respond.
Thank you. Councillor Weston and Councillor Wells.
This will be no shock to anyone. Metro West. What the hell is happening? I mean, genuinely, this should have been open in 2021. The whole purpose of the train stations was to put them in the early part of building the CPNN, so before people develop their travel patterns. We're now looking at 2028, so it's slipped yet again. For what I can't even see a real reason for this. So it slipped again, and now the houses are going to be mainly built out. They're going to have established travel patterns, and now it'll be harder to put on the trains. It's almost like we're trying to undermine our own rail program before it's even begun. And I say they have offered a few excuses on this. South Gloucestershire need to provide planning consent to this. Why? Well, it was delayed because the area that they're building on floods, which every single person in North Bristol knew it floods. That's why nothing was built on it. I have to say, I just feel that I've lost all patience with this. We don't seem to be able to build anything. And there's no ramifications for Network Rail when they are years late, when they actually finally do it. So I realise this is a small report. I don't have questions. It's just an aggrieved comment that just everyone in North Bristol is just sick of this. And it's like, we are doing work, we promise, and here's a new date. And by the way, it's 6 months after the last date we gave you. And that's happened for 7 years. And you're talking about accelerating it. I'd love to know how you're going to accelerate it, because we seem to be accelerating backwards.
Thank you for your question. For this particular item around North Filton, obviously this is about bringing forward to delivery to 26-27 period in target date. We've obviously delivered 2 stations in the last 2 years. We've got this one, and then obviously Portishead and Henbury to come. This is obviously working really closely with YTL and the Brabston development to align so that these enabling works will get us on track for a delivery of a station, phase 1, that is open in time for residents who live in Brabston to use. There is then obviously further work to be done linked to the arena opening, but we want to be able to get this station open in time for residents to use North Filton.
If I may just please, Chair, come back on that. Residents are already moved in. I know that because I'm at a party at one of the houses on Friday. So, and she's been there a while. They're already there, and the date for this is 3 years in the future. They're all going to be there. And we're maybe working in partnership with YTL, but actually, I don't care about that. I'm with the local residents. They're the ones I actually care about on this. We seem to be simultaneously stuffing up our roads with traffic cones and then not providing the alternative. This is the alternative. Sorry, frustration. I will shut up now, Chair.
I think all I would add is that we hear this frustration very clearly, and Chris and I do repeat it quite often to our delivery partners. We do reference these conversations, particularly your previous comments of previous committees on this. So I'm sure, but it's not falling on deaf ears is what we're saying. I think I would also say is that how the combined authority is set up is that we rely on a number of delivery partners, and we do less of a delivering and more of a commissioning, and we, are also at times at the mercy of people who are delivering these projects for us.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thanks, Chair. So on the Zebra, the zero emission bus something, it's obviously good news that we're getting even more of the electric buses. I'd recommend to all the members to have a go on one if you haven't already. They're the first wave are in service in North Somerset and going around Bristol, and they're just really good buses to be on, not just because they're electric, but they're also just quite good from a passenger experience perspective. So that's really helping to revolutionise the bus services. And they have air conditioning, which I'm sure people have been very happy with in the last few days. My question is whether we have any indication from government about Zebra 3 to continue this kind of amazing momentum we've got with electric infrastructure across the region.
to answer the question directly is that we haven't had any further updates from government around Zebra Free, and we don't expect to receive any further funding in this regard. And we don't believe there will be a Zebra Free from what we've been hearing.
Okay, so in that case, what are the alternatives? For example, could we include it in the TCR package, that kind of thing?
So we're currently reviewing the CRSTS 1 portfolio and looking at reporting within that. There is a scenario where the portfolio could be underspent with other programs being moved to the right into TCR or indeed other funding streams. That would give committee the opportunity potentially to allocate resource to expanding the fleet further, should they wish to do so. But that's one of the options which we'll be looking at internally as we review the data coming in on CRSTS1. With regards to TCR, the Mayor's intention is to produce a transport vision in the autumn. There was a question earlier around JLTP5 that will be produced at some point in the next 12 months following that vision being announced. If we are to learn lessons to how we approach CRSTS1, we should really take a very strategic approach to TCR and use those documents to guide what we invest in terms of our own priorities. And if greening the fleet is one of those priorities, then so be it.
Yeah, and I think it's also just worth noting that obviously this opportunity for additional Zebra buses has come about because of the fact that as a region we were able to deliver the first wave of Zebra buses, and other parts of the country were not. We were able therefore to submit funding for this, and we've got best part of half the available national funding through this round because they recognise how important it is for this region and how we're able to deliver.
Tim, then Lucy. Oh, Lucy first.
Thank you very much. I've just got two questions. One on the zero emission buses. It'd be nice to have a bit of an idea about how they're going to be shared around the different authorities. I was slightly worried that appropriately they'd be on roads where NO2 limits values are exceeded, but we've done quite well in getting ours down. So especially in Bath. So I just wondered, it would be nice to see a table about how and the criteria to distribute them to the different unitary authorities. My second question is about Metro West. So my concerns about this is the project exceeding the funding allocation of 82 million. I went through the report and I wasn't still really clear on the key reasons. Are you attributing it all to the absolute safety requirements of station building and ticket barriers, or it would be good to really see a detailed breakdown of where that where we're going. Coming, I don't want to use track again as a pun, but where we're diverging from another pun from where we need to be going with the funding. And also I'm concerned about the drawdown of the funds from the CRSTS programme. It's will result in another project being phased into TCR. I just wonder which project it will be phased into TCR and will not have its funding is coming from.
So with regard to the first question on Zebra buses and their allocation, that is an operational decision we will speak to first and get you that information. Chris?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. In regards to Metro S2, the more detail around the specific costings, as mentioned earlier, there'll be a full business case coming to a later committee meeting, which will be able to explain much more detail, and certainly the scope for what's required at North Filton has had to adapt in light of national safety standards following the Manchester Arena bombing and the requirements for additional measures where there will be an arena such as Bristol Arena. So that we'll be able to detail more of that in the full business case. In terms of what it means for CRSTS, this scheme had a provisional allocation following the CRSTS over programming item at committee last year, noting the need for acceleration of CRSTS. And as Ben mentioned earlier, there will be a paper later in the year around rebaselining, which will then be able to identify where there may be changes.
I think Stephen wants to come in on that point.
But in a paper that we took to the committee in March that related to the decision around Portishead, which of course was a similar situation where we were asking CRSTS to play a part in supporting that request. we were very clear that we were not going to allow any existing program or project that's in CRSTS to suffer any sort of detriment. In other words, to be somehow shelved, pushed back. And the way we did that was basically to say, A, we need to over-program, because we all know, don't we, there's an inevitability in life. Certainly when it comes to capital projects, you have to over-program. So we thought there was room to put more in without anything being forcibly moved to the right. They'll just move off their own accord, unfortunately. But underneath that, and it's in the committee report, so I'm happy to restate it, we said that if necessary, this authority has the power to use its own access to borrowing to provide, in effect, an underwrite to the cash, any theoretical risk that there won't be enough cash. So nothing is being sacrificed to allow other things into the program. And this is a really important thing, as you'll imagine, for us to get agreement on with the unitary authority colleagues. We're not making decisions here about one project being better than another. There is room in this program, and with TCR now confirmed, there is room in our transport planning for all of the things that have been approved.
Thank you. And Jim, did you have a?
Yes, please. Yep. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what's been said about the electric buses and what an absolute game changer that's going to be for the cities in terms of emissions. Just in terms of the Zebra 2, one thing I know is that there are 143 double deckers and 17 single deckers, which, given the number of complaints that I receive regularly about huge double deckers sort of operating, especially some of the supported services that first run in areas where you might have 4 or 5 people on the bus. I'm just wondering if we had any say over that kind of cut as a result of our putting in money, or whether that was totally First Bus's decision on how many of each they needed. That's the first question. The second question, and I apologise being new on this committee, this may have come up before, but I think they're all the new buses are being branded with the sort of green West bus thing. Was that a condition of the funding that we put in, or how is that? I'm just wondering how that's working across the region, the sort of West bus branding. Is that something we've agreed through enhanced partnership that is going to happen, and will we eventually see all our buses being, will eventually all the buses in the West of England Combined Authority be branded that way?
So with regard to the branding, an exercise was undertaken a year ago to produce the West branding. We are rolling that out in partnership with First, but to answer your question, not every bus will turn green or use the branding, because there's, for example, Metrobus, they've got the purple line and those types of things. So those will stay the same. But by and large, new buses which come online will be painted green and will have the West branding. This is about getting an integrated transport system up and going. You'll notice the West branding on the scooters as well, and also with the West Link and West Local vehicles as well. So it's really to help the public identify where the public transport system is operating and to increase brand recognition. It would be fair to say that we're not there yet with it, Councillor Rippington. There's a lot of work to be done in that space. And to answer the question which was asked earlier by a member of the public regarding West Local, we do need to confirm the resourcing for marketing for West Local. That's something which I'm in the process of doing that now. I think there will be some positive news on that, but we also need to confirm what we're going to be doing in the longer term, because as it's been rightly pointed out to committee, the funding is only available now until March next year, and plans need to be put in place to either extend or to look at an alternative system. So that needs to be developed over the autumn.
Did you have an answer to the other question about double-decker, single-decker ratios and that kind of thing?
The answer is we don't know, and I will go away and find out. Much to my shame, I'll go and find that one out.
Okay, and can I just come back on the funding for marketing? It was something when we put forward new supported services in Bristol recently, we did ask the question of whether there would be whether there could be some WECA funding available to help market them, because obviously the thing about supported services is the more people use them, the less they cost, so it would be really helpful if those could also get some marketing to get more people onto those buses.
It's a matter I've already discussed with the mayor, and the mayor's given me the green light to utilise the marketing budget to promote those services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, this isn't in the short report, but it might be touched upon in the large report to come. Do we have any indication of what comes next for the joint local transport plan? I think primarily the reason I'm asking this is obviously we've talked about the SGS quite a bit this morning, and JLTP4 had a transport funding shortfall of £6 billion. If we are to successfully get an SGS adopted, as we've seen with Stroud's problems, we can't be really vague on how we're funding major transport schemes, particularly if we have to tackle that question of unmet housing need and where it goes.
So the approach is a collaborative one. On Friday, officers held the first workshop with transport portfolio holders to focus on the transport vision, which the mayor is developing and should be developing in the autumn. That will then directly feed into our transport strategy and then onto JLTP5. What we want to do is take a very collaborative approach into the development of that strategy by working with portfolio holders and officers. JLTP4, I was there when it was originally agreed. With the committee agreed it, but then said we want to get on and start writing JLTP5, and now we're at that time in which we can do it. I think you may have asked whether guidance, or someone had asked whether guidance had been given by government yet. It hasn't to develop that strategy, but we're not going to let that delay us in terms of development, and we're going to we're starting that process now. It's really important as we start that process that we identify each unitary authority's priorities, but also tie that with the SDS as well as it emerges.
Thank you. I think another really powerful area for kind of pre-scrutiny and wider member involvement, whether here or in the unitary authorities. Thank you. We're on to, I think that's it on your right. Thanks very much. We're on to the financial outcomes, which I think is James, isn't it, speaking to this? Yeah. James, over to you.
Chair. So this report covers the revenue, capital and treasury management outturn for the 2024-25 financial year. So overall, the revenue budget shows an improvement, an improved final position versus what we originally expected. For the delivery directorates, we've exceeded the original budget, largely due to new awards since the budget was set, which is a real big positive. And at the same time, the corporate cost centres have come in below budget. We've also had really strong treasury management income, so that's around 10 million more than we were originally expecting. And that's allowed us to increase our reserves and hit the recommended level of general reserves for the first time, which is great news. We've also exceeded the original capital budget that we set by £20 million, although it is worth noting on that if we'd not applied an optimism bias factor, we'd have fallen about £10 million short. So overall, I think the authority ends the year in a stable financial position. We've got to be conscious of, I think it's come up a couple of times already, about the scale of delay on some of the capital delivery projects and trying to get a grip on forecasting accuracy for those. So if anyone got any questions.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you. I'm just wondering around employee costs, basically. I can see that there's been some effort to manage that and manage that to the betterment of financially. I just wondered if that's had any impact on our ability to deliver managing vacancies and what have you.
In short, no. We have obviously, like many public bodies, we have a problem with attracting people to fill vacancies, and we still have an over-reliance on some of our contracting arrangements. This is something we're going to look at very closely in the coming year, and particularly with the new mayor. We're looking at things like our organisation operating model, but essentially it's not presenting as a budget problem or something we didn't expect. You've heard about the slippage. Some of that will be due to people not being in post, but most of it is due to circumstances, as Ben has said, to do with other parties. But we're not artificially trying to constrain that recruitment and then paying a price. That the two things are sort of slightly disconnected. We are, however, looking very deeply, aren't we? And I spent a lot of time with these two individuals looking at how we account for our overall employee costs, because at the moment we I think have what I would regard as an unrealistically high. We present an unrealistically high picture of what is our core cost in this report. It's not really the case. It's simply the fact that we haven't recharged everything to the appropriate projects because of history. We need to fix that because the organisation inherently looks a bit lopsided. If you actually take a view of, the 17, 18 million or whatever the number is, 18 million pounds of core cost, that's a real overstatement, isn't it, James, of what we would say a core cost. Most of that cost is actually delivering projects and programs. So we're not constraining our ability to do stuff to try and sort of hit a number.
Thank you. Any further questions for James? Okay, thank you. James, I'm not sure whether you're talking to the Joint Committee budget outturn as well. So if you could just stay there for a couple of minutes, that would be great if we need that. So we're noting the Audit Committee annual report, or that's been noted in the joint meeting on Friday. And similarly, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee annual report is in there as well. If there's any further comments on that people would like me to address in my report to the joint meeting, then do let me know. Any comments on either of those items? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think James, onto the final item on the Joint Committee budget outturn.
Okay, thank you. So this report similarly covers the 2024-25 financial outturn position for the Joint Committee and includes both revenue and capital. So it's largely a similar story to the main budget. So revenue expenditures finished around £2.1 million above the original budget, which is due to increased funding since the original budget was set. And it was slightly below what we were forecasting was going to happen in the final quarter. That was particularly on environment, but it was largely due to projects that are delivered externally from the combined authority, so we're reliant on the quality of the information that we get from partners. The capital outturn was £9 million below the forecast, largely, and dare I say it, due to Metro West 2 and also the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Consortium 1. Again, that Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, we're reliant on good quality information coming from some partners there. We're sort of still getting to grips with that. It's the second round, and I think there's just some realism that we need to apply in terms of what can be delivered on that for future years. Again, the report shows overall that we're in a stable financial position, but again, we need to be conscious of delays to some of those capital delivery schemes. So I don't know if anyone had any questions.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. And next formal meeting is in October, and I think there'll be at least one briefing session between now and then, and a bit more work on the forward plan. Thank you, everybody.
Well done.